and announce the call. Welcome, everybody. Believe it or not, it's already Monday, February the 21st, 2022, at least where I'm sitting today. Where you are, it's probably already tomorrow for me, which is the 22nd, which is a cosmic day. Tomorrow is 2/22/22, which is really cool, I think. And I can't wait till 2:22 in the afternoon to see what happens. So that will be fun. And today's class is on the Pathways to Liberation skill called Openness to Feedback. And I'm feeling curious to find out how you guys like it. I've delivered 3 versions of this class to other groups and sort of been refining it for you guys to see how it works. And I hope you enjoy it as much as other people have been saying that they've been enjoying it, because feedback is certainly an important part of how we learn the skills and consciousness of nonviolent communication. You might notice that I'm flying solo today. Jory is a little bit under the weather, and she's lingering here in the background just in case I need help, but she's mostly not feeling good. So I've encouraged her to go take care of herself or to stay if she would like. And so right now I just see that she's kind of hovering in the background, and whatever works for you, Jory. I really appreciate any support that you want to offer, but I also want to take care of you. So let's see, I had something I wanted to share with you about, I'm going to try it a little bit differently this week, which is to put this screen up. So this is going to help me or Jory or whoever helps us make small groups today. If you know how to change your name on Zoom, then follow this format here, where if there's a language other than English, I put EN for English just to have an example. But if you'd speak especially Japanese or Mandarin, those are we often have folks that speak those 2 languages. Occasionally we have Spanish speakers or other speakers of other languages. And if you want to practice NVC in that language, then put that at the very beginning of your name. If you choose not to be in a breakout room, then put an equal sign. I don't recommend that because the most fun is in the breakout room. So feel free to not do that, and just leave that off and practice in small groups. We'll have at least 2 small groups today. If you happen to be an experienced practitioner, I noticed Sudha was here. She would put CT in front of her name, and if you're a certification candidate, put CC in front of your name. And if you're an experienced practice group leader, put CCC in front of your name. And all this is just to help me when I'm making small groups. And then just for fun, you can put where you're dialing in from today, or the place that you call home if you're on vacation or traveling or something like that. And you just want to identify what home means to you, then feel free to do that. And that just helps to create a quality of fun and connection to see how international that this group has become. So thanks for doing that. So more people have arrived. What fun for me. Hi, Zohar. Hey, Sharona. Hey, Tanya.
Can you move that leg?
So let's start with a self-connection exercise. For those of you who are brand new, maybe here for the first time, self-connection refers to one of the 3 different modes of nonviolent communication: self-connection, empathy, or honesty. We tend to practice all 3 with each group. So we'll start with self-connection, and we're going to do it a little bit differently today. And so I'm going to share my screen with you again, and I'm going to just put up the skill that we're going to be working on today, and I'm going to set my timer for 5 minutes. And the idea is during this 5 minutes that you'll read through this skill, if you can see it on your screen. If not, you can just kind of meditate or rest or something for 5 minutes. And then during that 5 minutes, I'll make small groups. So then you can go to small groups to talk about what comes up for you about this skill of of openness to feedback. So unless there's an objection to that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. And I'm going to set my timer for 5 minutes. And I'll go and make groups. About 30 more seconds or so. Those of you who are just arriving, we're just contemplating the words that are on the screen for about 30 more seconds. Just for the recording, before we shift to small groups, I'll just say that the skill again today is openness to feedback. When we wrote the matrix, we defined that as receiving others' perspective about our actions with equanimity and centeredness. And then there's these 4 different levels of integration of the skill, starting with unskilled, which means you've never heard of the skill before, which is where we all start, moving through an awakening phase when we become aware of a skill. And with practice, we become more and more capable. And eventually it just becomes part of our consciousness. And so that's what we'll be working with today, is how to make it more a part of our consciousness. So I see more people have arrived, and I'll go ahead and start us to get a chance to practice the empathy and the honesty parts of NVC. What we mean by empathy is just the listening part of nonviolent communication. So it'll be a chance for you to, since there'll be groups of 3, about 2/3 of the time, you'll be getting a chance to practice empathy. And one way you can practice empathy is to listen underneath, so to speak, underneath the content, and listen for feelings and needs. And when you're speaking, to do the best you can to speak the language of nonviolent communication. There's no particular form, but to speak from the heart, to speak about what's alive in you from moment to moment. What are you feeling? What are you needing? What are you requesting? That kind of thing. And I'll set up these the small groups for the timer will say 9 minutes in the upper right-hand corner of your Zoom screen. And after 9 minutes, there'll be 2 additional minutes, because sometimes it takes a while to get these groups settled in, move some people around, and add people that might have arrived after I started making the groups. So I'll see you back here in 11 minutes for the next step. And if you end up in a room that's empty or whatever, just wait for a few minutes, and I'll make sure that all the rooms you all have company eventually. Okay, see you all in about 11 minutes. Okay, for those of you who are still here, I'm working on putting you in rooms. Give me just a couple more seconds. Ta-da! All right. So I am glad to see more people have arrived. We now have about 52 people on the call. And in just a moment, I'm going to invite folks to check in here in the large group. And I'll have some specific requests about what I'd love for you to check in about. But some of you who have been here before might notice that I am by myself today. Jory is usually here as well. And Jory is feeling a little bit under the weather. We were out taking a walk last Thursday, and she fell, and
Oh,
she damaged her thumb a little bit. So tomorrow we're going to the doctor to have that assessed. She went to the emergency room right away, and she's wearing a splint. But it's kind of hard for her to do what she normally does here. And it's just taking a lot of energy to do the healing. So that's why she's not here today. So I'm flying solo. So things might be a little clunkier because there's only two hands instead of four, and two eyes instead of four, and so forth. But I'll do the best I can. I've got you guys to help me. So I appreciate that. Also, some of you are here for the very first time. I'm really glad. I don't know how people find our group, but every week some new people come and really enjoy having you come and visit us. Each session is a standalone session, so you don't require any previous NVC experience or attending any other classes. Each one is a lesson that is independent of others, and yet they also all build upon each other as well. Yeah, and in just a moment, I'm going to open up and invite sharings from the group. What I'd love for you to respond to is a very specific request. So check this to make sure that you're going to respond to my request, which is to talk about your response about what it means to be in a world where there's feedback. And so so what's it like for you to not know who's going to be giving you feedback when, and when you're going to have the opportunity to give feedback, and the kind of little conflicts that can come up around giving and receiving conflict. And so at the beginning of the class, for those of you here, I put up some skills around that. And so that's what I want to hear about for about the next 5 minutes or so. Any responses that people have about feedback. If you have other things you'd like to share about, there'll be time for that at another time. So, Siva, I see your hand. Do you have something you'd like to say about feedback?
yes, I am so happy that I'm old enough that somebody figured out before I could possibly, that I have the mentors and teachers like yourself who give me four choices. Otherwise, I think there would only have been one choice of how to respond in this world to all the shit that we drop on each other unknowingly. I mean, it just built into the way the English language operates.
Right. Yeah, we're going to unpack
So,
that a little bit today, I think, and
so I have a request.
hopefully it will give us
Please put me
all.
in the same room with the same three people. And for extra credit, I wanted to talk to Mr. Lake, Eric Lake, if he's my new empathy buddy
Okay,
at
I'll see
8:30.
about that. Okay, Siva, thanks. And
Only if he's willing.
sure. And Tanya,
Uh, I guess I see living in the world with feedback is just like living in the world where I have sensation on my skin, which is if I get feedback, uh, then I can avoid doing things that are really harmful to myself and others. If I receive the feedback in that mindset that this is someone attempting to help me meet my needs in whatever way they're speaking. And because sometimes things are painful, but it's great to have a little pain rather than fall off the cliff and die. So
yeah,
that's my experience of feedback.
thanks. So what I'm catching is that you're really celebrating the life-serving function that feedback can offer. Yeah, thanks, Tanya. And Rob,
Yeah, I have a short example of it, I believe. And, I think I'm only in the awakening here with, it's just that I was at the dog park. I had a great spiritual contact with this woman. She was fighting with her sister, and I told her, you've got to, you come to this NVC class. So I sent her a link. When I saw her next time, she totally ignored it. She didn't care about it. And I somehow was not open to that feedback. I was, that, and it actually led me to this class, myself. This was the link I sent her. But, and I still have an aversion to it. So I must admit, I'm still an awakening somehow. When people say, for instance, I'm not really interested in NVC, that's like, oh, come on, this is the such a goal for everybody. Yeah, I'm awakening.
What I catch, Rob, is that you're really noticing that receiving feedback can be an edge that might stimulate some pain sometimes, especially if it's feedback that comes in a form that we don't enjoy or content that we don't enjoy. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just thought she could enjoy so much NVC. It could really help her with her sister, and
Yeah.
you can't, I couldn't drop that. I still can't drop it. So anyways,
sometimes we
yeah,
chew on these things for a long time, don't we? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, especially when it has a some sort of I know it's for myself, I can only speak for myself. I notice that if I frame the feedback as negative, then I tend to chew on it a lot longer than if I frame the feedback as positive. And there's some reasons for that. Maybe they'll get uncovered as we keep going. I think there's some good reasons
Okay,
to do that. Okay, thanks, Rob. And
thank you.
Rena.
Yeah, hi, Jim. And for me, this question itself, that how do you feel being in the world of feedback, brings me to this Marathi wisdom, that "तू हीच आहे तुझ्या जीवनाचा शिल्पकार," which means you are the sculptor of your own life. And yes, it used to be, feedback used to bring me unease and fear. But, if I am the sculptor of my own life, then feedback is so important. And with the skill that the matrix offers, I'm kind of, looking at it with a sense of adventure and trying to be calm, alert. So alert for sure, because there's so much that, gets stimulated through feedback. So yeah, it's like that, to have a skill and the last quadrant about considerate, I think brings to me a lot of spaciousness, that I can consider it with clarity of choice. And I love that. I do exercise my choice, and now there seems to be more openness. So, thank you.
Nice.
It's
Nice.
the real world. I want to be in the real world with an ideal as my vision.
You bet.
Yeah,
You bet.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rena. Karen. Karen, you disappeared. Okay, maybe Karen fell off the call.
Yeah,
Oh,
there we go. I'm here.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
I was muted. That doesn't work. Um, so I have a question. When I look at the chart from left to right, and I remember an incident a couple of weeks ago in a meeting. This is an example of unexpected feedback. And in that meeting, someone said to me that I was arguing, and the subject of my arguing was nitpicking. I did not see that coming, and I felt shocked. I felt shock, and I felt devastated and surprised. And if I were to look at that grid at that moment, I would be on the unskilled level. And I was going to ask you if you could speak to fluidity, like, so if I can feel shock about hearing certain feedback, then I can't consistently rate myself.
Yeah.
Anyway, could you speak about
Yes, I
time
will.
of recovery?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll actually do it right now. So while it's still fresh, and I'll come back to the three raised hands. Let me put the chart back up so people know what we're talking about in case they weren't here at the very beginning, which is fine, by the way. So this is what we were hanging out with at the very beginning of the class. This grid or matrix, we call it, of a particular skill, this one being openness to feedback. And what I'm hearing from you, Karen, is that you got some unexpected feedback and you had an emotional reaction to it. And then you had the experience of telling yourself that you didn't have any skill with feedback, at least in that moment. And you're wondering about the fluidity of this pathway on the one hand, and also how to recover from any reactivity that might happen when we get feedback. And so first I'll say just a couple of words about fluidity is that this is definitely a dynamic process in my experience. There are times I've been practicing NVC for 20 years and things like it for 20 before that. And I can tell you that there are times when I receive feedback and it's like, what's the skill of openness to feedback? I have no earthly idea what it means. That I just get a reactive pattern, and that's actually the definition of human being. Is that because we're animals, we react to stimulus. A stimulus comes in, we will react. And then as we continue to grow in our skills and consciousness, we can become more human, which means that we can begin to develop more choice about how we respond. The reactions will continue. The response comes after the reaction. Okay? So let's just say that I hear from somebody that I talk too much during a training or something like that. You can't imagine that happening, right? And so somebody says, Jim, you talk too much. And I'm not really expecting it. It's kind of coming out of nowhere. And I react. I feel shame. Let's just say that my reactive pattern is shame. I've trained myself now after 20 years of NVC to notice that reactive pattern. And so then I'm immediately awakening. Almost immediately. I have the reaction and then I begin to awaken to the presence of the reaction. So I start transforming that reaction through self-empathy. And I think you modeled it perfectly when you said you noticed the feelings and you named the feelings for yourself. That's a very key part of beginning to transform a reaction into a response, is you name the feelings. And then the second part would be to connect the feelings to your needs. What's important to you when you receive this feedback? And then through that process of self-empathy, we gradually walk ourselves back to an integrated state where we get, oh, okay, so I got this feedback. Does it mean anything about me? Is there something I want to learn here? Or is this really just about the other person? And we'll explore this in more detail as we go into the rest of the session today. So yes, we will always react as far as I can tell. Even the Dalai Lama has talked about, and this is a guy that's been practicing since he was 4 years old. This is a guy that the world, many people in the world revere as a holy spiritual teacher. He still reacts. And so, of course, I'm going to react. I'm just a guy, living with a lot of privilege in Maui. And so, of course, I'm going to react to stuff. And but I do have this desire to transform this reactivity. This is such an important part to begin to cultivate because I want to be like Tanya. I want to be in this consciousness that, oh, feedback is a gift. Feedback has a life-serving purpose. And so I start talking to myself that way, and I walk myself back on this very fluid pathway. So I'll pause there and see if what I said makes sense to you, Karen.
Yes, thank you very much for that. So yeah, so it's a play in action.
It is. It's a play in action. I love the way you put it. That's great. All right, and Jeanette, go ahead.
For me, it's been a long road to discernment, meaning that if I trust the energy that feedback is coming from, I end up trusting it. If it's coming from an intention to criticize, put down, demean, power over, then I guard my heart, because I've learned that it's just not constructive to react to an intention that doesn't have a quality that I trust. And that's a very hard thing to, it's almost pre-verbal. I work with young children and I see where this pattern gets, and I turn into a child when I'm with them. And it feels like, oh, finally, I understand now what happened. If I sense a good, a healthy intention, no matter what comes out, then I can take it in. If I'm sensing something is about control, then my walls go up.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting how that works.
Yeah, it is interesting, and it's so important that you notice that. I think what you're talking about is a really important insight to notice, and the skill of discernment to notice that you by how you discern a situation, the meaning that you give it in terms of your guess about the intention of the person sending the message really matters to you. And it's easier for you. What I hear from you is that it's much easier for you to take in and learn from feedback when you catch the positive intention of the sender. Yeah, great. Yeah, we're gonna maybe even stretch that skill a little bit today. So we'll see what happens if we can stretch something there, if you'd like to stretch it. Jennifer, go ahead.
Your question about living in a world of feedback would be my worst nightmare, because I can't tolerate any sort of feedback whatsoever, praise, anything. So I'm the opposite of Tanya. For me, it would be like living in a world in which my skin was so ultra sensitive that I couldn't discern something that was safe or something that was dangerous. So the only thing that I've got on this awakening sense is that I know this. I certainly would like my skin to be a little bit less sensitive, but I have no idea how to do it. I went through the book while we were doing that grounding exercise, and there was nothing in your book that gave me a hint. So I'm looking forward to getting some glimmer of something else. So there we are, folks.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that honesty. I'm really touched by that awareness, that self-awareness. And you actually are pointing to, in psychology, they call what you're talking about when you compare you and Tanya, for example, individual differences. And of course, we're all going to have individual differences. Nobody has the same DNA except your twin, if you happen to have one, and nobody has the same upbringing, even your twin, because you weren't together for every single moment of your life. And so these two aspects of how we are, what nature gives us, and how we are nurtured, they create an individual experience that we all bring in. And if we have almost everybody here, maybe everybody on the planet has suffered trauma. And the way that, depending on our trauma history, that really can determine our experience of feedback. So that's why I'm so glad that you have this awareness and that you are open to stretching a little bit. Just think, if you could enjoy feedback 1% more than you enjoy it now, then it might just be way less irritating life to live. Yeah. So I'm really glad that you're here and you're willing to stretch into it. How do you feel hearing that?
I actually believe that, Jim. And how do I feel? I feel in a way laughing, because it seems like an impossibility, but I'm sure, like everything else that I've worked on here, it will have some effect.
Yeah. Thank you. And Ayako, Welcome. What would you like to say about feedback?
Hi. First, I'm just so happy you mentioned about His Holiness Dalai Lama because I'm a big, big fan of him. And I just want to say the idea of openness to feedback is a whole new idea to me. The other day, I was like just looking through that matrix, and I found it, well, and and this is really eye-opening. And yeah, so I'm just first step, and
Oh,
I just start awakening maybe.
hey, good
But
morning.
yeah,
Good morning. We're all awakening. That's great. Thanks, Ayako.
yeah. So
And
surprise. Thank
surprise.
you.
Yeah, it's a new day. Some new things to
Yes.
learn. Yeah, cool. Yeah. Aviva?
Um, so actually, Chile Yantema just put in the chat that sometimes, maybe and this is what I was going to speak to, the feedback, our willingness to accept it depends upon the energy that we're reading from the person. So sometimes for me, I love feedback. I often ask for it and I'm like, okay, what do you think? Let's go, let's go. And I feel like it's a way of being fair and kind of communally trying to create that, collective. Um, I think I totally failed at giving feedback to someone who's 20 years younger than me, a woman. Last night I was at a women's group and I asked her before, could we set parameters to make it safe, and could we have guidelines, and could we this and could we that. None of that was taken into account, and I felt very unsafe. And when I spoke up, of course, it appeared as if I was the bad guy, like criticizing. And no one in the group knew that I had spent time trying to tell this woman ahead of time what I wanted and been specific. So I guess I'm wrestling with right now, like my energy is big, yet it's like a heart of gold. And how can I transmit um, feedback or input or suggestions that are actually taken in a successful way, and instead of like maybe somebody just resisting it. And that's partially why I'm here tonight. And thank you all for being here. I do much better when I'm teaching and offering and asking other people for input. Then so I think it just depends on people, and knowing your own
Absolutely.
limitation.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you so much. I see three more hands up on the screen, and I'm torn in the moment. I would like to see what you have to say, but I'm wondering if you three are willing to hold until I do a little bit of the lesson, and then we'll do some more feedback along the way, and see if what I say next might address what is alive in you. If not, then we'll come back and revisit it. Would that work for you guys? Okay, I see the hands going down, so thank you very much. So I'm going to share my screen with you again. And first I want to tell you, I'm really touched by the feedback. You all just gave me feedback on yourself and where you are in your life in terms of your own relationship to feedback. And that's very helpful for me as a facilitator and a trainer, because it helps me to adapt and adjust what might really support us going forward. And so I would like to invite everyone to just take 2 minutes of silence and to write down. A few people have already mentioned some recent situations where you got feedback. So write down an observation of a time when you got feedback recently. It can be a time when you enjoyed it, a time when you just absolutely loved the feedback. It could be a time when you didn't like hearing it, but don't pick something that would send you off to your therapist. We want to keep the intensity level kind of low, but any feedback that you received that was a little bit painful, like some people have put into the chat, would be perfect, or something that was kind of neutral feedback. If you don't want to talk about or think about receiving feedback, then you can also talk about a time like Aviva mentioned, when you gave feedback and it wasn't received. But write down some kind of an observation to give you something to hang the lesson on, to hang the content on in relationship to your own life. So I'll be quiet for 2 minutes while you think about and write down an observation concerning feedback in your life.
Jim,
Yeah, John.
do you mean like an NVC observation of this is what I observed happened, or
Yeah.
are you looking for something else?
I'm not expecting people to know how to do that, but since you should know how, then yeah, you should do that.
Are you shooting me?
I am. That's right. So I recently received some feedback. If you're not done yet, you can continue to just ignore me. I'll just tell a little story, and maybe this will help people that haven't quite gotten an example yet. I received some written feedback. I stood for an election, a volunteer position with a board. And part of the process of receiving votes was people had the opportunity to give feedback. And I got about 15 pieces of feedback. And about 13 of them were like, oh, Jim's great, kind of praise. And 2 of them were, I don't know about Jim. So that would be my observation. I'll be quiet for another 30 seconds in case that stimulates anything more for you. Okay, I'm going to share my screen with you again in just a second. But first, as you consider this example that you just wrote down, this is what we call an observation. Like John was pointing out, that if you've done some NVC before, you might know that what we call this in NVC is an observation. And that's just means, it's just a fancy way of kind of like a lingo to talk about a description of something that happened in your life. That's all it means. It's nothing fancy. It's just a description of something that happened in your life. Specifically, it's something that you probably heard, or something that you saw. It may be something that you smelled, tasted, or touched. But so in other words, we collect our observations through our 5 senses. And then sometimes we take this observation and we add something to it, which is what we call in NVC an evaluation or a judgment. We add some color commentary or opinion to the observation. So rather than saying, my boss told me that he wished that I would do this thing that I hadn't done, that'd be the observation. And if I wanted to add a little evaluation, I'd say my boss was a complete jerk again today. He told me that I didn't do it right. So you can kind of get the flavor of the difference there. One's very descriptive, kind of dry, not too much emotion. The other is just packed with moral judgment and evaluation. And so that's just an important distinction to notice. You don't have to really do anything with it other than to just notice the difference. And in NVC, we aim to make our observations as descriptive as possible. And there's a reason for that, which is that if we want to talk about it, if we want to give feedback, then it's so helpful to let go of the evaluation before we deliver the feedback and just say what we saw, heard, smelled, tasted, or touched. And maybe that'll get a little bit clearer as we keep going. So you chose this observation because it probably brings up some feelings for you. So it's important that you just notice the feelings. That's all you really need to do with it right now, is just notice that there might be feelings that arise in you in relationship to this observation. And like when I got the feedback about the election, the feeling that came up for me was something like surprise, and the other feeling was confusion. I was just surprised and confused. That's as far as you really need to go right now. Is just notice any feelings that you notice in your body. NVC is a body-based somatic experience. Our bodies are like the instrument, the gauge that lets us know that something important is going on in our life. So now I go back and share my screen and we talk a little bit about feedback. And so in any kind of a feedback system, there's going to be some components. And so we're only going to be talking about 4 different elements or components of the feedback system today. And I think it's enough to, without overwhelming you, but it's enough to provide some clarity. So in any kind of a feedback system, there's a sender, a receiver, there's intention, and there's impact. And so in my case, the sender is an unknown person who wrote something on a web form. So somebody sent me a message. That's all the sender means. Somebody sent me a message. I'm the receiver in this case. In your observation, you may be either the sender or the receiver. But as the receiver, I just received information. I received some feedback. And then the other 2 things that matter are intention and impact. And the receiver, both the sender and the receiver, are going to have both intentions and impacts. And we'll talk about that as we keep going here. So now to continue your own exploration, if you were the sender, or if you can empathize with the sender, what do you think the purpose of feedback is? What do you think the purpose of the feedback that you received is? In other words, why did they send you the feedback? So again, I'll be quiet for a couple of minutes. And Steve, I see your hand is up. If you could send me a chat and ask me your question, I can then include it in the answer rather than interrupting the flow, if that works for you. From the point of view of the sender, what's the purpose of the feedback? About 1 more minute to consider this question. And I like that some people are adding some things in the chat. That's can be helpful for everyone else. And there's a private message to me that asked me, are you talking about feedback that we do not like? It could be either. You can talk about the purpose of feedback from the point of view of the sender, whether it's whether we like it or whether we don't like it. This is really kind of shifting our empathy toward the sender. What's going on in the sender that's motivating the feedback from their point of view? And then turn it around. Since there's two components in this very simple feedback system, both of which could be inside yourself, by the way. We often are our harshest critic. Sometimes we are giving this feedback to ourselves. But when I was planning this lesson, I was thinking that this would be relational. That in this case, I'm relating to somebody that I don't even know who they are. But now I get to look at, I've received this feedback. What am I going to do with it? Why is it important to me? I set my life up to receive this feedback. So what purpose can I assign to the feedback? What's the purpose for me as the receiver of receiving the feedback? And in the case that you were the giver, then now you empathize with the person that received your feedback. What's the purpose from their point of view?
I've just not quite understood this, Jim, this bit. I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure which, I get from the point of view of the receiver,
Okay.
but I don't get the next bit.
Yeah, so if we're the receiver, then we're going to connect to what's the purpose of receiving this feedback for us. If we're the sender of the feedback, now we have to kind of empathize. What are they going to do with this feedback? What's the
So,
purpose? Yeah, go ahead.
so there's two parts to this question, is there?
Right. Yeah. Basically, we're looking at there's two different components: a sender of a feedback message and a receiver of a feedback message. And now we're just kind of making some guesses about what the purpose of these two people in the system are from moment to moment. Does that make sense?
No, not entirely. I got the first bit of the exercise, which we've just done.
Okay.
Now, from the point of the receiver, that's me, because I was in this imaginary situation, of course.
Yeah.
And so I know what I'm not sure. Is it the feedback that they're giving me
Yeah.
that I'm now rating? I'm now trying to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've received some feedback from somebody. And
Yep.
now you could ignore it. You could act like it
Yep.
never happened, but you're taking it in somehow. Why? Why are you taking this feedback in? That would be the purpose of receiving the feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
thank you for dogging for clarity. Okay. So what you've been practicing, even though if this was your very first time doing an NVC training, you've been practicing empathy. When we're making guesses about purpose of either a sender or a receiver, if we're talking about the other person and wondering why are they doing what they're doing, we're practicing empathy. We're making a guess about what's motivating another person to behave in a certain way. That's all empathy is. Sometimes we mix up empathy with a moral judgment. We think that somebody wants to hurt us. Well, maybe they do want to hurt us, but for the purposes of this lesson, we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that they have a positive intention. And the reason that we're going to assume a positive intention, because it's kind of an underlying presupposition of nonviolent communication, an underlying belief of NVC is that every human being behaves with the intention to meet needs. What could be more positive than trying to get needs met? So this person that sent me this feedback message anonymously, I'm guessing they wanted to connect. They wanted to contribute. They wanted to convey some information to me. So that's the purpose that I ascribed or made an empathic guess that motivated the person that sent me the feedback. My purpose in receiving it is to learn. What can I learn from receiving this feedback? How can I integrate this into my life so that I can be a more happier, well-functioning human being? Or do I want to just receive it and discern, is this useful or not? If it's useful, I want to take it in. If it's not so useful, I let it go. What's the purpose for me in receiving the feedback? So that's all we're really doing here, is either empathizing with the needs that are alive in us as the receiver or the sender, or empathizing with the needs alive in the other person that's either the sender or the receiver. So I think I want to pause there and see if there's any specific questions about what I presented so far. Is there something that's not clear so far before we go into some specific examples? There's a question in the chat that nobody sees but me, which is fine. It says, is there a difference between criticizing and giving feedback? Maybe, and I think that might get clearer as we do the next step. I don't want to go into too much analysis of the other person, but I would say it this way, that criticism is a form of feedback, It may not be a particularly fun or life-serving form of feedback, but it is a form of feedback. And someone writes in the chat, there's a big difference for them between criticism and giving feedback. And I think there is a big difference. And it has to do, at least in the way that I define these terms, but I don't want to go off down that little rabbit hole yet. I want to see if we get there indirectly. Yeah, and someone writes in the chat, it's so good to have feedback in good quality and probably in good quantity too, for that matter. So now let's look at some specific examples of how this might impact, I mean, not impact, how it might affect the system for both senders and receivers. So we're going to look at 4. And so let's look at the best thing that could happen systemically in a feedback system between a sender and a receiver. The intent of the sender is to enrich the life of the receiver, and the impact on the receiver is they're going to learn something. They're going to have that experience of being enriched. They learn something. They deepen their own understanding. So I would call this a match. The person, and this happens all the time, you know, we might invite, let's say we're having people over for dinner, and we genuinely want to find out how people felt about the dinner that we served. So we say, how did you like the dinner that I cooked? And we're going to assume a positive intention on the sender of the feedback. And they're going to say, well, I really enjoyed the salad. I love the freshness of the salad and the dressing that you chose and the mixture of the vegetables that you put in there. But the dressing for me was just a little bit salty. I prefer my food, I prefer to add salt myself rather than have it in the dressing. Well, since I asked for the feedback and this person is giving it in a way that's in alignment with my request, it's really easy for me to take this in and think, wow, next time this person comes over for dinner, I'm going to try to remember not to add salt and just leave the salt on the side so they can salt their own salad. So I've learned something. They've enriched my life. So systemically, this feedback system really worked well. There's a match between the intention and the impact. Isn't that the world we all want to live in, where there's always this match? And of course, it doesn't work out that way because there's the opposite. There's the worst thing that could happen, where from the point of view of the receiver, I assume that there is an intent to punish. I'm going to make this really small for right now so you can't see it yet. I meant to do that before. I'll talk about it in a minute. I assume that the other person wants to belittle me, criticize me, tear me down, et cetera, et cetera. I assume that they want to punish me, and the impact that it has on me is pain. And when I say pain, I'm choosing that word really specifically. That pain is the natural reaction that human beings have when their needs are not satisfied. So when I'm hungry, that's pain because I'm the feeling of hunger is pain that lets me know my need for sustenance is not being met. So there's nothing wrong with pain. It's an important signal that I really want to open myself to receive. When I cut my finger, I want to feel that pain. And now emotional pain is processed in the brain exactly the same way as physical pain is. It's exactly the same part of the brain, the same brain areas light up with emotional pain as physical pain, and it's just a different set of needs that is being activated when we feel emotional pain. So let's just say that we'll go back to the salad thing, and I say, I say to the person that's at my dinner, how'd you like dinner? And they say, they cross their arms, they sneer. Sneering is where you kind of move your nose to one side, and they say in a voice that I associate with sarcasm. They say, it was just salty enough for me. Okay, so when I receive that, given in that way, I might experience that as pain. I might feel hurt or angry or disappointed. Okay, and I'm kind of loading it a little bit because I'm assuming that the person wants me to feel this pain. I call that a hallucination of intent, by the way. And so now I'll make this bigger again so you can see why I did it this way. For me, this isn't quite right since there really is no need to punish. I usually associate intent with needs. The deeper underlying need of punishment is to contribute to learning or safety, well-being, etc. So even if the person sneered, crossed their arms, and said something that I interpret as sarcasm, underlying that is a positive intention that they're trying to contribute to well-being. Their well-being, my well-being, from their point of view, they think this is going to work. I think it's what Marshall Rosenberg, the founder of nonviolent communication, would call a tragic expression of the need to contribute. A tragic expression of the need to contribute. Because when I feel pain, I tend to shut down and I don't learn anything. So this goes to the idea about criticism. So if I tell myself that you're trying to criticize me, that's a form of punishment. And I'm actually going to create a wall of separation between you and me if I think that you're trying to punish me. But if I can shift just a little bit with some self-empathy or empathy to see that underlying the way that you delivered your message, there's a beautiful need. The need to contribute, the need to contribute to learning, the need to have a better tasting salad next time, whatever. So this is also a match. The person from the point of view of the sender, they actually they may want me to experience pain. We've been watching this show on Netflix about a cheerleading competition, and some of the coaching. And I think this comes about across in the Olympics too. Some of the coaching seems to me from the outside punitive, but the athletes love their coaches because they realize that it's somehow motivating them to learn more. It's not the way that I'm wired up, but I'm not an athlete, at least not in that way. So it wouldn't be a match for me. Let me just pause here and just check in with the chat. See if I'm missing anything. Yes. Yeah, so Amalia says, for me, the most essential point on the dinner example was you have asked for the feedback, so it was a natural reaction to welcome it. And so I'm in harmony with that, but there's a match when I ask. Now, if it could still happen that someone could give me feedback without asking, and the same thing could happen. It could either be, even if I didn't ask and the person gave me feedback, I still might learn something, or I still might feel pain. But now let's go a little bit deeper and see what happens if something else might happen. So let's say that now, again, from the point of view of the receiver, now this is like the far end of the pathways to liberation skill. So now the person intends to punish me. They're sneering, they're crossing their arms, they're giving me this, what I'm interpreting as a sarcastic tone. And they say, the salad was just salty enough for me. I can still take that in and learn something from it if I'm coming from what we call the 0 step. It might take me a couple of minutes to get there. First, I'm going to react. because I'm an animal. I might feel a little bit surprised or shocked or hurt. But if I then give myself some self-empathy, then I might get curious. Well, what's going on for them? Tell me more. What is it about the salad that you didn't like? So I still might learn something. So even if the other person's trying to criticize me, I can reframe that situation and turn it into an opportunity to learn. I'll get back to that question in a minute, Sarah Joy. So then one other possibility, now from the point of view of the center, this for me is the most painful part of a feedback system. So let's say that I'm having a meeting with Lori. Lori is here to help me today because Jory wasn't feeling well. So she's going to be my little Zoom driver to help me make small groups here in a minute. And so let's say I'm having a meeting with Lori. She happens to be a certification candidate that I'm working with. And I want to really let Lori know, I want to enrich something about her journey as a certified trainer candidate. So my intention is pure as the driven snow. I want to contribute to her. I want to help her to become the most wonderful trainer that's ever existed in NVC land. And I actually do all my own inner work. I'm very clear on my observation. I'm telling myself I'm coming from zero. I'm expressing it as in pure NVC, so to speak. And Lori still might experience harm. That's a mismatch. This is the most, for me, the most tragic thing about a feedback system, and why most of us are allergic to feedback, is because either this happens or this happens. And so if these two things happen, especially when we're about 4 years old or 5, we go to kindergarten, and our kindergarten teacher is really trying to enrich our lives. And she says, Jimmy, when you walk into the classroom and you forget to wipe your shoes, you get mud all over the floor. And I feel really frustrated because it really takes me a lot of time to clean and sweep the floor. And we have a classroom rule that we always take our shoes off or wipe our feet. And so would you be willing to take your shoes off? But if I've had enough messages in the past that were like this, I'm going to take it as pain. I'm going to experience her loving expression as pain, as harm. This for me is just heartbreaking that our educational system is set up in such a way that there's so much of this because of a lack of skill in delivering feedback that we end up with this. And so someone says, explain the 0 step again. I'm going to turn the screen off so you're not looking at this the whole time. 0 step simply means that I'm very clear on my intention, which is to connect. I place my attention on the present moment. That's all it means. So this is the underlying intention and attention of nonviolent communication. I intend to connect, and by connection, I'm talking about connecting to observations, feelings, needs, and requests, or intent to make life wonderful is another way that we often express it. And I'm doing that right now in the present moment. Then there's a natural openness to outcome that begins to bloom when we do that 0 step. So now I get really curious about that feedback. So now there's probably a lot stirred up in you. So I'm going to keep these same groups that we had before, and we're going to take 15 minutes. So I'm going to change the timer to 15 minutes. And this is your chance just to go and talk about it with some friends. And Lori will help to fill in the groups. If there's some empties, there'll be 3 people in a group. So everybody will have about 5 minutes to just share what comes up with you about feedback and try to balance it so everybody has a chance to share what's alive in you about feedback. Pay specific attention.
Same groups, please.
Yeah, same groups. Yeah, same groups. You're right, Siva. I got that. And so pay attention especially to what you're taking away from these from this the sender, receiver, impact, and intention piece. And talk about it. If you need some empathy, get a little empathy. If you want to share what's alive in you, share what's alive in you. And Lori will help to fill out the group. So if there's 3 people per group, about 5 minutes per person, then we'll come back and talk about it some more. You don't have to do anything to come back to here. You'll automatically come back here at the end of the 15 minutes. All right, enjoy the connection. This is while you're going, this is a chance to practice 0. Clarify your intention to connect and bring yourself to the present moment and enjoy making life wonderful with each other. In the big group, so I'm going to turn the recording back on. And while you guys were all in your small groups, I was getting a chance to connect with a new participant from Lebanon today. And so I got to learn some things. I got some interesting feedback about how they do things in the French certification system. So we're going to take a few minutes now to hear from you about what you're taking away from this exploration of feedback. So I invite you to take just a minute of silence, just with yourself, and maybe to write. But take 1 minute and consider, what are you taking away about this exploration of feedback? And how might you be able to include it in your life from now on? So I'll write it into the chat, then I'll start a timer. What are you taking away, and how might this impact your life? So be quiet for 1 minute, and then we'll invite you to raise your hand and speak. Okay, if you'd like to be heard by the large group, feel free to raise your hand like Siva has done and answered my question. And so there's a question for clarity. See, this is why feedback's so important, because I'm not always as clear as I would like. So Ayako says, I'm not sure what you mean by taking away. Taking away is, I guess, an English expression that just means I've learned something and I'm taking it away with me into the rest of my life. I've taken in something, and now how might it impact my life? Siva, and then if somebody else wants to speak, just raise your hand.
I think the takeaway is simple, simple, simple. And this is my takeaway because I've made a choice to believe what I heard Marshall say. And that is, people are trying to tell you one of two things, just two things. One of them is, please understand me. Please understand the me of my heart, even if it sounds harsh. I'm begging you to please understand I am speaking from my heart. Or they are saying, thank you. Thank you. Even though it's hard for me to get a message into my thick skull, thank you. So if you can believe, you can choose to believe whatever you want. So just believe that people are either saying please or thank you. Very
Beautiful.
simple.
Thank you, Siva. I love that that way of bringing NVC down to just the essence. Everything we're saying is either please or thank you. And Rena?
Yeah, what became more clear today is that there is possibility of pain and harm in, from that lens of pain and harm um, in feedback, and that might be from our past, so to be tender around that with self and the other, and the zero step bringing us to the present with hope for the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I'm cherishing.
Thank you, Rena. Yeah, I cherish that too. I'll read a couple of the chats, which is an alternative way of giving feedback here. If you'd like to be heard, your voice to be heard, I want to encourage that as well, especially if you're usually don't speak. I will try to stand back from my anxiety and notice I am receiving feedback. This will give me the chance to hear what they hear from them, and that it will be okay. When receiving feedback, what can I learn? When I feel overwhelmed, I need self-empathy. I love that. Juliana and then Iris.
I'm so grateful that today, Jim, I learned that it's natural to feel hurt if there is something that's coming to you and you're surprised about it, or it's painful in the way it comes. It's just natural. And what I can do for myself is give myself self-empathy so that I can move and shift to being curious about it. So I have that tool today. I just got hold of it. And the second thing is that when a person comes harshly, possibly there is a place where they are crying out for love they've not received it as a child. So can we just be aware of that?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Juliana. That reminds me that of something that I've learned along the way, that when someone gives me feedback in a way that I don't enjoy, they're probably letting me know how they have received feedback in the past, because they've learned how to give this feedback. And that's maybe the best lesson that they ever got, was that the way that they're giving it to me. And Iris, and then Rob. Go ahead, Iris.
Hi. Yeah. I feel so touched that the most great thing I take away is no one wants to punish me. So it's really touched that if I can put this in my heart, whenever I hear any feedback, he's not intend to punish me. But I realize that this is because of my tragic experience of my childhood trauma, I guess. And I'm really caused so much pain. And then my self-defending system is working so fast. And from this lesson, what I would take is I would take away from the self-defending towards the openness, and just step by step. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me in the journey. And I expect it to take the rest of our lives to really get to that far end of the matrix. And I hope we can enjoy the journey. It can be very bumpy sometimes, especially in relationship, like relationship with family members, husbands, wives, spouses, children, and so forth. They can be our greatest teacher in reframing that all they're ever saying is please and thank you. Thank you, Iris. Glad you're here. Rob, and then Zohar.
Yeah, I think I'm taking away that I just noticed that when I'm self-connected and more in a space of trust, I think that 0 step, flows quite a bit better to just attempt to connect and to be in a present moment. And my request to myself is to, if somebody gives me some feedback, if I'm not clear on it, to make sure that, maybe I ask them a question back. I mean, can you please clarify that, or, because message sent might not be the message received.
Right, right. So I'm really glad that you're underlying our power. We can share power with those that are giving us feedback. It looks like they're the ones with power because they might be talking as if they're power over us, but we can reframe that and we can balance power through our requests. Requests can help to balance power. I really appreciate you bringing that up, especially when there's a need for clarity. Thanks,
Mhm.
Rob. And Zohar.
Yeah, I feel like what we talked about today is like a big invitation to give up the position of being right or righteous about something, of being a victim, and yet accept and even embrace the vulnerability that I have when I receive feedbacks. And I see this invitation so clear, but honestly, my first reaction is like, I'm not sure I'm ready for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really
Yeah.
glad you said that, Zohar, because that's another way we can share power. Is sometimes sometimes feedback comes without invitation, and there's not much we can do about that. But sometimes we can make a request. Like we noticed that Jory and I learned the hard way that our worst conflicts happened at 10 p.m. because we were like saving stuff up all day. And so finally, we woke up that we didn't have resources to receive feedback at 10 o'clock at night. We were ready to close our eyes and let our brains do whatever they do. And so we learned to say, "Can you hold that until the morning? I really want to hear it, but I don't think I have the resources to take it in right now." Sometimes we can do that with feedback. We can make a request to put it on the shelf until we can be more resourced to receive it. So I appreciate that call for self-care and the strength to make a request. Thank you, Zohar.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you also for your patience. I know you put your hand up earlier and I asked people to wait, and I'm so glad that you came back to let us hear your voice today.
Oh, thank you. I also wanted to make a request, and I don't know if it will echo with other people here. I feel like this is such an important skill of the NVC, and that so many of us just fall in the trap there. Yeah. And I don't know if you will be willing to dedicate another class for this. I felt in the breakout room that we had so much to share, but so little bit of time. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if this is something that other members of the group would like. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the request. We are going to extend it a little bit next week because the skill next week is called beneficial regret. And it's about when we make a mistake and we want to share our vulnerability with other people. So it's a particular kind of feedback, but I've made a note. I think we could probably do a 1 month session on giving and receiving feedback.
Yes.
And it would still barely scratch the surface. I do this with candidates. I do more of an extended period with them. So when we finish the matrix, we'll come around and maybe spend some more time with feedback. I think it's a really worthwhile place to put our energy.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And so before we hear these last three hands, I want to do what we usually do at 6:25. And so if you can pause for just a moment, I want to let folks know that you can get copies of the recordings and listen to them after the fact by going to this website that I'm putting into the chat, pathways-to-liberation.com/resources. So after a day or two, I tend to get the files up. They're not edited, or if they are edited, they're very lightly edited. And so they're pretty raw, but I think they're still useful for people. And you can use these for your own review, or you can use them in your own practice groups, or whatever way that you would like to utilize them. Secondly, we do everything we do here in the spirit of compassionate giving and receiving, or also known as the gift economy. Jory and I have been offering NVC practice groups for 20 years now, and we've never charged a dime for them, but we receive a lot of money because we're giving this gift with compassion, and people want to gift us back. So every week we receive literally now hundreds of dollars from people, and that money comes into either us or directly to the Center for Nonviolent Communication, which is Marshall's the organization that Marshall started in 1985, I believe it was. And so we dedicate the money that we receive from you to carry on Marshall's work in various ways, including we're about to make a big donation to CNBC from your gifts that will help to fund a platform, like a social network that will continue.
Who's it, dear?
Oops, we got somebody bleeding. Let me mute that. If you can get it, Lori, thank you. And so we're going to be, because of your generosity, we're going to be able to fund that platform for another year for our trainers and our trainer candidates, our board, and eventually the plan is this year to open it up to the community so that you will all have a place to join us on what we call the global home. And so thank you for continuing to donate to our work. And finally, I took advantage of some spare time during this pandemic as we stopped traveling to write a book called Pathways to Nonviolent Communication. And if you'd like to buy a copy, that's another way to fundraise, because all the proceeds for the book go to support the Center for Nonviolent Communication and Marshall's dream of making NVC available to anybody who would like to receive this valuable training anywhere in the world. We now have a system of over 600 certified trainers and about 1,000 trainers in the pipeline, so to speak. And so over the next few years, we will be tripling our number of trainers, hopefully, and extending our outreach. My dream is 1 million trainers. Why not? Let's have 1 million. There's 1 million accountants in the world. Why not have 1 million NVC trainers? So let's see here. I think that's the end of my announcements. Now, if you have something that you'd like to offer our community, like maybe there's a book that you've read recently about NVC or mindfulness or communications or something like that that really has supported you, or maybe it's a podcast that you really enjoy, or maybe you're a member of a practice group that is open to having other people come and join. You could put that into the chat and share it with other people here. As part of a community bulletin board. Somebody says, how do we harvest all that? Well, you can. If you look at the chat, at the very bottom there where you type your message, there's 3 dots. And if you click on the 3 dots, it should say Save Chat. So then at the end of the call, you can click Save Chat, and then the chat will download as a text file into your computer, and you can have the things that people have shared in the public chat. And with that, I think I finished all the announcements, and I'm going to keep the recording going because these questions might be really juicy. And Tanya, go ahead. Comments or questions?
A comment. One is, I love that you brought up again what to say when you know you're not resourced to hear something that you might not enjoy. It's important to say, I really want to hear what you have to say, and can we do it in the morning when I'm awake? or whatever. Another one on feedback is when you receive feedback, you can always say, oh, would you like to hear what was going on in me when I heard what you had to say? To ask the other person if they want to hear your response to their feedback, or do you want to hear what came up for me was I watched you do whatever it is you did. To ask before you give feedback. Yeah. To me, greases the wheels.
Absolutely.
And the other one is when you've heard, and someone has offered you free feedback that you weren't ready to receive, just to be able to say, I really need to think about what you said, so that I can go off and, do deep cleansing breaths for a while before I say the mean thing that was coming into my mind to say.
Right.
So.
Yeah. We can pause in peace before we act with some kind of clarity about what we'd like to share. Beautiful. Thank you, Tanya. I really appreciate that. And before we hear from Siva, I want to put one more thing into the chat, which is some people have asked us to give you homework. Which shows a lot of healing around our school experience. But here's something that you could consider as a practice opportunity for the week, to notice that when you're sending feedback, what happens? Notice what happens when you send it, and check to see whether the impact and the intention line up, and what happens when they do and what happens when they don't. So it's just a chance to sharpen your observational skills about giving and receiving feedback. Okay, and go ahead, Siva. Whoops, I see your lips moving, but I haven't heard your voice yet.
I wanted to know if Zohar would be willing to accept feedback from me.
Maybe at the end you'd like to go to a small group.
No, I'm already going to Eric Lake.
Oh, okay.
All right. It's very quick.
So Zohar?
Yes. Sure.
Willing. Okay, so Zohar, I see you as very, very courageous and even more beautiful than you were on the first time I saw you.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Well, I think that that wraps up all the hands. So if you'd like to stick around, I can make small groups for you. I'd like to go and have some, we call it the after party.
Jim?
Yeah, go ahead, Zohar.
I do have a question. I don't know if it's for everybody or for the, just, did it happen to you that you received a feedback? It was not in a very like close relationships. It was in just not a random person either. And you found yourself very feeling a lot of pain and understanding also the pain and all the whatever came up with it in you. You were trying to not react from that place, but to be very I don't have the word in English, but like ask, so what do you mean, like stay correct at the zone of the conversation. And then afterwards, when you just processed everything at home, you decided to go with your vulnerability and the pain you felt more than understanding the other person. I mean, even though I understand the purpose of the other person, my pain is still bigger than that. And did it happen to you, and how did you navigate something like this? And did it happen to you that you just decided that, okay, I'm just gonna end this relationship because I understand the purpose of the other person, but my pain is just too big to stay in this and I want to leave?
Yes, of course. Of course, for me, NVC is about adding choice and not ever about taking choice away. So I would never want to say that you should stay in a relationship that's not working for you, that's not meeting your needs. I'd much prefer that we focus. The kind of the metaphor that's often used in NVC that I really enjoy is that we need to put the oxygen mask on our own self before assisting others. And so, maybe you make a request to take a break from the relationship. Maybe that's what makes the most sense. Maybe you need to make a request to go to therapy, to find a peaceful way to go your separate ways, or maybe a mediator. That's actually what Jory and I's specialty was, as when we were doing pretty much full-time mediation. We would help couples to come together and navigate. Now what? It's not working for us. What do we do now? Or to discern the choice. You can always just leave. Of course you can leave. The joke that we used to say in our practice group is there's 7 billion people on the planet. Why not choose somebody that makes your life more wonderful? So of course, follow your heart and trust, and trust where it takes you. That's what comes up for me, Zohar. How do you feel hearing that?
Yeah, I feel relief. I understand my self-judgment about me wanting to walk away from this relationship. As I said, it's not a close relationship. It's my relationship with the school of my daughter, just to be more clear about it.
Yeah.
I thank you.
Yeah.
I understand that I was judging myself for wanting to go away.
Right. Well, we're conditioned to do that. One of the as many benefits have come from kind of the self-help movement, to call, which NVC maybe is a part of the self-help movement in some way, where we've kind of taken a lot of psychological principles and read lots of books about them and learned to integrate them. Sometimes we get the message that we should stay. It's always up to us to do the transformational work or whatever. And I'd like to live in a world where we share that power, and where we actually can claim that power for ourselves and move toward. I mean, for me, it's about making life wonderful, and that might look very different at very different times in very different circumstances. But let that be my 0 step. What will make life most wonderful for the system that I'm most involved with? Which in this case might be your family system or the new school system that you'd like to join, and so forth. What would be most wonderful? It's not our job to fix all the broken systems. We get to choose which ones we want to work in. Does that make sense to you?
Thank you. That's taking a lot of load
Yeah.
off me.
Good.
Yeah.
I like seeing your big breath. And let that one go. Yeah. No more burdens.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you'd like to stick around, we'll make small groups for you for the after party. And I'll go ahead and turn the recording off. Thank you all for being here, and I hope Jory is able to come back with us next week and have fun with us as we explore beneficial regret. All right.